Today I have with me Rodney who is a professional speaker and comedian, and we'll be finding out a bit more about his story and his life story and encouraging ideas that will help motivate you. Rodney, what started you in the professional speaking business? What was the trigger, the kick-off?
As a comedian, one tries to find different channels of communication. These days, maybe the internet would be the first thing. But in those days, it seemed that, and I think it's still true today, that the professional speaking circuit is a place where a comedian and different other sorts of presenters, educators, motivators, inspirational speakers, can find a civilized audience, a sober audience, mostly, an audience that is ready to listen in lovely theatres with beautiful microphones and lecterns and lighting and staging.
Was that attracted you to get you going, or, was there a spark? Did you, maybe say, sit in a library room or watch somebody on TV and said, I've got to have that job?
I think going to the chapter meetings was really important.
Who invited you to the chapter meeting then? Who was responsible?
A guy who I saw at a 3M event.
Oh.
He was a salesman selling overhead projectors.
Wow.
And he said, you've got to come to the National Speakers Association of Australia. I said, okay. And I've never looked back, and I think that was 1991.
Oh, okay.
And I've been a member since then, and I've heard so many wonderful speakers and quite a few wonderful entertainers as well.
So what got you into entertaining, being a comedian as such? What was the...
I like the self-reliance nature of it, like being a writer, director, travel agent, dresser. You can see the beautiful tie I'm wearing.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're part of a theatre company, which I was for 11 years, you really spend a lot of time listening to other people talk about their personal lives, which often is not that interesting and doesn't drive the quality of the work.
That's probably a very honest admission, I suppose, of what really goes on in those things, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think if I'd been born in another century, in the 19th century, yes, I think if I'd been born in the 19th century, I would have been maybe a monologuist doing some comedy and some drama.
Right.
I like the self-contained nature. It's just terrific that you can go out on stage without any props, sets, costumes, audio-visual backup, and just have a fireside chat with a small or large group. I've performed with lots of large groups in the thousands and quite a few very small groups, around a boardroom table.
Right. Yep.
I guess the most common size of my audience is about 60.
Right. Yep.
Which might be a group of managers or a group of leaders from different industries, a group of managers from the one organisation. It really is, it has its own dynamic. A huge audience, you're like really tiny, and you rely on being large, being loud, and being slow.
Yeah.
And when you're with a small group, it's like a soiree. It's just a dozen people. And they might be the directors of the company. They might be the board chair and the company secretary and really senior people. And that has its own...
So tell you, what's your act? What do you actually do per se?
I'm a comedian, and my subgenre is that of the comic hoaxer. So I have more than 350 very important characters.
Wow. Talk about split personality, eh?
So, I infiltrate, usually for half a day, and brought on to give a keynote address, which people realise after a while is not a keynote address, but is a comedy performance.
What would be one of the most funniest, as in, oh, I'm trying to entertain these people and this went wrong and that went wrong? Have any incidences like that over the years?
Lots.
Any memorable that you can recount?
Sure. I should preface this by saying that the overwhelming majority of performances have been successful, but out of maybe 3,500 performances,
wow,
there's inevitably something that goes wrong. That's either my fault or technical fault. You know, the microphone fails or the lighting is zapped or the stage collapses or something like that. But I remember many personal fails. One was for a restaurant chain called Liverpool Dining, and actually, I hope they're watching. That would be great. This was maybe 20 years ago, and it was their first ever conference, and they were, and they still are, a vibrant, lively, fun company. And so they had a morning, an afternoon, and an evening of seminars. And in the morning, I played a French intelligence officer, and then in the evening, I was to play an American motivator. And the morning went fine, but people had started drinking before breakfast. It was their first. They didn't know how to behave at a conference, and
funny about that.
And a couple of the staff had a fight, a male and a female, and a wall was punched in. Another gentleman took off all his clothes and jumped in the swimming pool, and then a police paddy wagon came around to this resort, and he was extracted from the pool and naked on the bumper bar of the paddy wagon as he was going into this mobile jail. He resigned and gave some strategic advice to the company that included geographic descriptions as well. So I said, and then during my evening performance, a very drunk female took the microphone from me and began singing, and it was hard to retrieve the situation. So I asked the resort how they got paid, and they said they got an imprint of the credit card. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So they decided not to pay me, and so I took my wife and kids to their finest fine dining restaurant, and we had a lovely meal, 3-course meal. And at the end, when they came with the bill, I said, "Oh no, don't worry about the bill. Just say to Abdul that Rodney and his family loved the experience. Thank you very much." And off we went. It didn't really go any way towards the cost of the fee, but it was some sort of moral revenge. So that was, yeah. I don't know how to, sometimes I get asked, will you perform while people are drinking alcohol? And I say, sure. And I just hope that they haven't been drinking since the early morning. I've had very few bad debts, so that's at least on the good side. So what's it like working with the corporates? How do they find you, and how do they get to know you're around? Is it referral or is it? They're very cautious. Yeah. They usually need someone who's seen me. They know the genre, and in the US, my genre is called put on. So I see. Put on artists in the US. In Australia, it's either corporate imposter or comic hoaxer, and there are 3 or 4 of us here. Testimonials help, and usually an actual personal introduction, or not just a personal introduction, an interview. So an interview. Called in for a chat. Oh, I see. Yeah. People are worried that comedians will swear and good point. Insult and so on. So I suppose you've been hit with the pun. Do you ever feel imposter syndrome? Ah, yes. Yes. Well, no. I know what imposter syndrome is, and it's been around forever, of course. People feel unworthy of their success.
Okay. And look, if you were to give some advice to a new speaker starting out, what would you say would be some of the important things that they would need to consider in today's environment? In the professional area, that is.
Work about the client. If possible, mention their name, their services and products, and get to know their organisational chart, and mention the names and designations of the senior people in that chart. I think we're there to serve the audience. I would always say, from a self-interested point of view, that you should add humour, and there are lots of people who can help you with that, or books or tapes or whatever. YouTube channels, how to add more humour to your presentation.
That's a really good thing to do, because no matter how much people say, I really want to learn about this software program, if you can, or I want to learn about this particular economic environment, or this particular social issue, if you can do it with humour, you'll connect with your audience more easily.
And what have you found is different now to, say, when you started out 30 plus years ago versus today? Is there anything that stands out today that you say, wow, that's a really big change from the professional speaking I did years ago?
When people are checking you out, they usually can be better informed about who you are than years ago. So, make sure your website's good, make sure you've got a LinkedIn profile. No matter how good your Facebook or Instagram or Twitter is, if you've got a LinkedIn profile, it shows that you're in business. So LinkedIn and your website won't necessarily get you the job, but not having them will lose you the job. So
right.
Sort of preconditions. And
have a memorable domain name, if possible.
Yeah, because yours is chameleon.com.au.
Yes.
So, very good one.
Yeah.
Good one.
Well, I guess I got that in about when they were first allowed as words, so maybe 2001.
Wow.
So I'd already been...
so you were a real early starter then.
Early starter.
Yeah.
So, but I've been a professional comedian for a decade prior to that. So it's not the only thing that matters. You are your brand. Whatever your name is, it's your brand. But to be really clear about what you're... So, for instance, Rodney Marks, comedian.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously the word comedian is hugely more famous than my own name.
Yeah.
So you've got to try and find what it is that your topic is, if it's customer service, if it's presentation skills, if it's relaxation, whatever it is. You really need to invest in associating your name with that service offering, and to know what that service offering is, and to have it as narrow as possible. It's no good being, I've got 20 topics I can speak on. You really want to have just one topic.
Right.
And update it every year. If you're doing customer service, you can talk about customer service wins and fails of the last 12 months, but that's who you are. You're the customer service person.
If I was to ask a question about money, if that's okay.
Sure.
What do you get paid these days for doing a talk or an appearance? What's the dollars in that these days?
Well, it depends. It depends if it's part of a series, so that you really only need one briefing, and then you're rolling out. So if it's a roadshow or a season of some sort, some of the banks will have maybe 8 presentations in the one day and change the audience but keep the presenters.
Oh, I see.
So that would be a different rate to just flying into insert name of flying into the Gold Coast.
So what sort of dollars would it vary from A to B? What would if that's okay to ask?
My corporate fee is $7,500 plus GST, which is a sweet spot, obviously between 5 and 10. But so there are many people who are more expensive than me, and many people who are who are less expensive. So I try and not have the fee being the main thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to be known as, well, who knows? Maybe you do want to be known as the most expensive in your category. That's a niche as well.
Yeah. But apart from that, what's the biggest kick you get out of doing it? Is it the audience reaction, or
Absolutely.
is it the... Yeah?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We were talking before off air. I much prefer working live to big screen or little screen. Although, I do that as well. Especially during COVID, I was doing Teams, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom, and some just pre-recorded video.
Platform people were using. But I'm pleased COVID is over.
Yeah, part 2. We're going to talk about what it's like to run events, and also what's the future of public speaking. What do you see as, say, the future of public speaking at this stage? Where do you see it going?
I think that as we become more and more removed from social interaction, with screens separating us from real life, that the yearning for real connection and conversations with real people and listening live to real people, I think that live events are here to stay. That if they won't be replaced by Zoom, maybe augmented, but not replaced. I think that, as always, the events will have to address the latest hot topics, and reading the newspaper or listening to the news or scanning the internet for what those sort of top topics are is going to be always the right thing to do, always relevant.
And what's the sort of like when you first started speaking versus today, what are the hot topics that are now that are so strange you never would have thought of being the case 30 years ago?
Well, the surprising thing is that a lot of the hot topics are the same.
Really?
How to have difficult conversations, how to present in public. Of course, how to present is different now. But whether you were presenting on a blackboard and then a whiteboard and then an overhead projector and then PowerPoint, and now with some sort of alternate virtual reality, you still have to be very clear about what you're saying, to say it a number of times, to say it in a way that's not patronising, that it's chunked, and so on. Those things remain the same.
Okay.
How young people can meet each other without being awkward, how you can make yourself more engaged in your work, how you can lead, how you can manage. Those sorts of things are perennial.
In the corporate market, are they more into KPIs these days, or what's the sort of things that the managers are really wanting to get you to talk about?
The metrics are more spoken about, but I don't really believe that they're more taken into account. I still see people advancing in their careers because of their personalities rather than their performance.
And I see that companies' balance sheets can be down, and yet the leaders can get bonuses. So I think that we're human before anything else. And some of the companies I perform for, I think, wow, this is wonderful. I should stop being a comedian and come and work for these people. But it's not really the product or the service. It's the vibe and the leadership.
Oh, okay.
For instance, I've seen great leaders in telecommunications and in fast food and in government services, in museums.
Oh, wow.
And I just think this is so. A great leader is someone who can really affect the morale and the productivity of the group. So, I hope that answers that question.
No, that's okay. So, when it comes to logistics, being a professional speaker, what are some of the things that you've learned maybe say through either hard experience or your planning ability, that are an absolute must, and you would say, hey, other people that are not quite so experienced in the speaking area need to really listen to? What are some of your thoughts on that matter?
I'm interested in staging, and for me that means elevation and distance from the audience. I like to be reasonably close to the audience. There's a comedy mantra that distance is death. All right, I'll talk about those. I like to be lit by more than one light, otherwise you've got shadows.
Like right now.
Like right now. I like a lectern, and I like a microphone with a fresh battery. So
very good.
People can spend $1 million on an event, but not $1 on a fresh battery. So I always ask the technical directors, can I have a fresh battery? The tech crew are your friends, so get to know them. Turn up early, look at the staging. If you're in a venue, for instance, that has tables and chairs, a huge dance floor, and a stage on the other side of the dance floor, and they put you on that stage, pick up the lectern and carry it down the stairs and move across the dance floor so that you're really close to the audience.
Oh, okay. So you really want to short that gap up as much as you can.
And just generally, get to the venue in advance and have a look at the layout. If possible, sometimes people will give you, the event organisers will give you a floor plan, a map of where the audience is sitting and where the presentations are taking place. And you can change some of these things in advance. Sometimes what is agreed on isn't the reality, so you get there in advance and try and change if you possibly can. And if it looks like, you're the third speaker on and you've come 3 hours before but the other speakers are happy, you have to talk to the audience as you are moving the staging.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Just say, look, what I'm doing is...
And inform them.
Yeah. People will do anything and agree to anything as long as they don't feel that they're absent from the process. If they're part of it, they're consulted.
So you're sort of like saying, I'm moving this to be closer to you, just bear with me for a minute, or did I tell you the one about blah, blah, blah when I didn't do this? Something like that.
And you can also get people to lift up chairs.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
In a different arrangement. You can get people to move down the front. You can get people to move up the back. Whatever you want. As long as you tell them, I prefer an audience in a semicircle. Would you mind if we move this theatre style to U-shape? Or whatever. I prefer to present in the round. I prefer to present when everyone's standing up. Whatever you like. But the logistics include travel, of course, whether it's just local travel or interstate or international.
Well, how far flung do you have to travel? I mean,
I've performed in a dozen different countries, mostly the US.
Oh, wow.
I must say, but also the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and some Southeast Asia. And I try not to be jet lagged. I try to get there, have a good night's sleep, and also I try not to be on the last flight because Murphy's Law, things happen.
Yeah, true.
Even say travelling within Australia or travelling within the state, you try and not rely on the traffic being smooth. You don't rely on there not being a cancellation or two of aircraft. If you're speaking at a lunch, if possible, go down the night before.
Yeah, I agree. I believe it's a case of if you're there the night before, you've got all those hours up, but if you're only arriving there in the morning, Murphy's Law will have a funny way of getting a hold of you. Yeah.
Try and factor into your fee 1 or 2 nights accommodations, and if they only give you one, take the one before the event.
Right.
Because if you're delayed going on to the next event, well, yeah.
Good point. Right, have you had several sometimes where they're back to back on the same day or maybe within the same region?
Yeah, it's unusual, but comedians have a kind of an in-joke where we compete for who's had the biggest switch. I had breakfast in Perth and then dinner in Broome. Oh, that's nothing, and on it goes. I had to drive 12 hours and then...
Like the four Yorkshire men of the Monty Python story.
Right. Yeah, that's right. But no, I've had 3 gigs in the one day that involved 2 states.
Wow.
So that was but it's too stressful. I wouldn't advise it. The problem is you can't, when you're starting out, you can't really say no because you need the work for the income.
Yeah.
But also work leads to work.
That's true, yeah. The more you perform, it's like a Tupperware party, you'll get 2 more invites at the same meeting, or that kind of thing, as they say. Do you work with any other comedians or other entertainers or other speakers?
I've worked for many years and still do stand-up where you're on a bill with 8 other people.
Oh, right.
So you mix and mingle backstage and you kind of get to see them or hear them or see them from the side, the other performers. Well, that's another thing. I mean, I've performed, comedy can be a freak show. I've performed on the same stage, although not with Mr. Methane, whose act is musical flatulence.
Unbelievable.
And I've performed with the Regurgitator, who comes on stage with a fishbowl full of different coloured goldfish and will swallow them in the audience, in the order that the audience requests, and then regurgitate them in a different order that the audience requests. And I've performed with a very nice man, Rash Ryder, who used to have a bit where he would scoop out the contents of a watermelon and put the watermelon skin on his head, have a little hole cut out for his mouth, drink a glass of water, put the watermelon on his head, walk out onto the stage, wait for the laughter to die down, and then expel water through the hole, take the watermelon skin off and say, that's my impression of a melon-headed whale. So in each of those 3 cases, you enter the stage and there's an aroma, there's goldfish water, or there's bits of watermelon on the stage. Just awful. But you have to be careful that you don't fall over.
So you really have to be on the moment, maximise the situation as best as you can. So
you have to mention it.
Acknowledge it. Yeah.
And I think that there's a freak show element too to some professional speaking lineups. If you're at an event and it's a conference for a day, there'll be some heroic adventurer telling you how they've overcome obstacles. There'll be some person who's suffered from a terrible disease, some person who's been in a war zone, and then you come on doing comedy. Well, you can't ignore what's gone on before, that's disrespectful.
True.
On the other hand, you can't take the mickey out of it either. So
you've got to acknowledge it, but move appropriately with it, which you've no doubt developed a finesse with over a period of time.
I don't know about that, but it's nice of you to say. But it's another good reason to get to an event early to see what's gone on before, because that will have shaped the audience's ability to receive what you're delivering.
Right.
If someone's had a heart attack in the audience an hour before you come, and you don't know about it, well, that's just laziness on your part. You really have to be.
You have to be up to date with what's going on as much as you possibly can. Yeah. Wow. Just one other thing. Is there any particular things which are final, highly memorable moments that you would like to say that was in your speaking career thus far?
Well, on Sunday I had a lovely gig for me. Most of my income has been earned from corporate, and still is. And 30 years ago, in 1993, I did a gig for Horseland, which is now an international chain of retail outlets that sell saddles and other equipment for equestrians and horses. And the owner rang me late last year about a gig in 2023, right? 30 years later. Oh, we really loved you. We've been looking for a way to get you back. It's like, okay, I'm glad I'm not dead. I'm turning 80. Would you do my 80th birthday party?
Oh, wow.
And so I did, and I came as his personal solicitor and conducted a reading of the will. And that was a really lovely thing to do, that he would entrust me to do that, and that it came from a corporate gig, but then it gone into his sort of, family mythology.
Wow. So, and he trusted you to deliver the funny on the day. Wow, that's great.
Say that, there's a whole other family out there, and what you thought was 100% is now 50%. And, such a child has not been very hard working, and some grandchildren don't deserve anything at all. So in my other family,
that sounds really neat. Well, look, if anybody was to contact you, what would you recommend them to do from here? Do you have any special package or anything that they can get to find out about your services?
Well, we could begin an email conversation. If you come to my website, which is chameleon.com.au, then do speak to me on my email address, which you can get to at chameleon.com.au.
Perfect. Oh, thank you once again, Rodney. Thanks for coming on today, and thanks for all of the input that you've given to our group. And I look forward to having you give another interview at some other point in the future.